Hello, everyone. Welcome to Leading with Agility, the show that uses the world around us to explore how leadership can be inspired by agility. I'm your host, Arif, and as always, I'm joined by...
Myself, TK, a coach that doesn't always know what to say.
That's an interesting introduction, as always, TK. Thank you very much. And
I always make them up on the fly.
Yeah, well, yeah, you can see that very, very well. Welcome back to all our listeners to our show. Thank you again for being with us. We have the pleasure of your company, and I have the pleasure of TK's company, and it's a beautiful, hot, sunny day here in London. It is, it's
for people that like it, you can call it beautiful. For people that, prefer a bit of a colder or milder weather.
Milder weather, yeah. I wouldn't mind the mild. I mean, it's fun, isn't it? You're always looking you're in winter, you're looking for the sun, you're hoping for hot, nice weather. And then it comes,
greener grass, yes.
Exactly. And then it comes and everyone's like, oh, gosh, it's too hot, can't handle it, etc., etc. So the paradox of weather in the UK. Speaking of which, right, well, in terms of paradoxes, etc., today's episode, we're going to be talking about workplace authenticity. And it's been on the agenda for a while. I mean, many of you who work in people functions, HR, etc., I'm sure are familiar with the topic, and it's part of your agendas in terms of how to create a workplace culture environment where people are authentic, they can be authentic, they can come and bring their whole selves to work, as it's known. So there's always this constant, or not there always is, but there has been and there currently is a drive or a push to increasing that in the workplace, TK. As well, some of you listeners may be aware, and doing the bit of research for today's episode, and it's suddenly eye-opening for me. It still remains a challenge in many workplaces, with employees still feeling uncomfortable and still unsure about what they can't say, what they can do in the workplace for fear of causing disruption. So the question...
Employees feeling uncomfortable.
Yes, exactly. So the question that I wanted to ponder in today's episode really is, has this drive to create workplace authenticity failed? And are we in some new place now, or is it just that more work needs to be done? That's the question to explore today.
I guess it's a good question. I would first explore, what it would mean for it to succeed, to know if it had failed, right? So for me, workplace authenticity, it's an interesting one. Obviously, we've talked about it for quite a while, and I've been, writing and talking about it too. It's a bit of a spectrum. So one would say that, if you bring your whole self to work and you're being accepted, and everyone is able to accept each other for who they are, just as human beings, I guess this is a success of authenticity in our society as it is, right? Many people, especially these with conservative values, might differ when it comes to the society. But when it comes to workplace authenticity, so being your whole self at work, the success would be that, everyone's accepted for who they are, the way they show up at the workplace. So to your question, has it failed? Well, your data shows, and the research that we've done says that people, feel uncomfortable being themselves, and maybe this also means that people, feel uncomfortable because they might feel that they're not accepted. So I wouldn't say it has failed, but it definitely hasn't yet succeeded.
Yeah, for the record, we haven't done any research. We look at other people who do research who are more qualified than us.
No, but we do have some experience, though.
Oh, yeah, anecdotal, if that's what you mean. Yes, I meant academic research. That's not what we do.
Yes.
Just need to make that clear. No, you've raised some valid arguments, TK, in terms of we need to discuss, yes, you're right, has it succeeded? What's stopping it from succeeding? All valid. In terms of the data point, since you've mentioned it, interesting piece of research, as I was just saying, 41% of those seeking employment say they remain uncomfortable being their whole selves. Part of that research apparently is around the belief that in the workplace certain things or certain topics are off limits, and would be frowned upon if they were discussed. And you mentioned this point about maybe attention if you are of a more conservative nature versus progressive values or whatever. Maybe that's part of it. I don't know necessarily if that's specifically the case here, but it's a general point about a feeling around what can be said or what can't be said, which raises a question around, workplaces are all unique ecosystems.
Yes.
And so what is acceptable in workplace is going to be different in another workplace. And so then there's a question of what's the etiquette, what's the culture, what's normal, what's not normal, etc., etc. So I'm struggling with the generalization. That's the word I'm looking for. I'm struggling with the generalization here in terms of, okay, there is a percentage of people who are, thinking about this, employees, workers thinking about this, worrying about it. I'm not sure if it's, the research is the research, but just in terms of anecdotally, as you say, TK, it may even differ down to team level as well. You can create. I can imagine, and I can recall being in team settings within a wider organizational setting where you may have higher tolerance for disruptive conversations or what could be labeled disruptive compared to another team in the same organization. And that's a cultural difference that is accepted very, very locally. That's interesting maybe to discuss as well, Tika. I don't know.
Absolutely. I think, it's, two things here. Let me address one thing first in terms of, like, as you said, I'm quite uncomfortable when it comes to these generalizations. But if I take it at face value, there's one question that, comes to mind for me when I see these 41% that feel uncomfortable being their whole selves. The big question I would like to ask before we go into, let's call it inappropriate behavior, whatever it is, which is the second part. The first part is maybe people feel and remain uncomfortable about being their whole selves because they feel like they are inadequate and they need to pretend somehow.
Yeah, I think the pretending point is interesting. You're hiding or masking, how you feel, how you think, and then it goes into other points, or that can go into another discussion around code switching, for example, which we've covered in a previous episode as well. For listeners, feel free to check that one out. So that goes into a whole other conversation.
Okay.
Which is valuable, but I think sticking to this in terms of maybe the masking element or hiding element. There's some stuff I want to talk about maybe in the second half of this episode around leadership and how leaders maybe do some of that, and where actually authenticity can be a problem for them, and how it might cause them to be in difficult positions. So
if I may, then it means that we would like to focus on behavior, certain topics, as you mentioned, that are frowned upon or are, let's use this mild and all-catching term, inappropriate, right? So as you say, there are some industries, teams, and companies, organizations that have a different and varied level of topic variety, let's call it, or things that are a bit more controversial, a bit more edgy, and I'm using euphemisms for a reason. But also, I think what's really important here is in the current day and age, even if you have an organization, let's call maybe it's a bit famous that, for instance, in the military they're a bit more edgy. So if you've got an organization that, let's say, uses locker room talk on a daily basis, there are people that might feel uncomfortable. And in the 2024, there may be people that might need to adapt to it, but and not say that, look, I don't like these topics, really.
Yeah, so now you're brushing up against a good challenge around when does authenticity become toxic behavior, and when does it become abuse, harassment, bullying, and the like, potentially. So what is really, so there's a question about, okay, what's acceptable societally, within the organization, and then how the maybe not contradiction, but the brushing up between authenticity and inclusivity. Okay, so you want everyone to be authentic, bring your whole self, at the risk of what? You're not including something, or you are including everything. So I wanted to let's just reset not reset. Let's just clarify some reasonings as to why so-called authenticity is important. Okay, so there's plenty of research on this already. Some existing research successfully has shown the relationship between authenticity, well-being, and work-related outcomes, all three having some direct links.
For more authenticity, more well-being, and work-related outcomes, I guess.
Exactly. Sorry, yes. So the more authentic people are in the workplace has a direct impact on their well-being, and therefore well-being meaning you'll be more performant at work and hopefully more productive in the work you're doing. Aside from that, other research showing that authenticity at work and healthy psychological functioning are known to be mutually reinforcing. So that's interesting. So your psychological state, your ability to perform, has a direct, mutually enforcing relationship with how authentic you are. And again, that has an impact or knock-on effect on performance-related indicators as well. So
so happy to agree with these, yes.
Yeah, so that's the existing research. So already exists. But I think, as I was saying about the inclusivity point, there is a challenge around, okay, the reality still exists that for people to be really authentic in the workplace and bring who they are, it is impossible for everyone. And as I mentioned, we've talked about code switching and we've talked about DEI-related topics already. So I don't want to go into that in a huge amount of detail, aside from just the really focus point here, which is, I think, for example, coming into the workplace, for people of varying backgrounds, whether minority or majority, their perception or their reinforced education that's been, they've gone through around what is considered to be quote unquote professional, for example, is going to be subjective. So, me coming...
You have to give more examples.
Yeah, so what I mean by that is, what does professional at work look like? How do you carry yourself in the workplace, right? And if you're coming into a workplace culture that has a dominant view of what professionalism is, suited, booted, tie, black shoes, etc., saying certain words, behaving in a certain way, maybe if you've not been... have a cultural background that has taught you all of that, or you've experienced any of that, there will be a culture clash, and you will find it difficult to be authentic about who you really are. And then, like you said earlier, TK, the mask comes on, because now you have to fit in and assimilate. So you can't really be authentic, can you?
And as you've established, that there's a positive reinforced loop between being authentic and performance and psychological safety. So I would guess the opposite might still hold true.
Yeah, which is, I think, what I'm trying to say, right? Which is there is not a negative, but there is a side effect here that, okay, humans are predisposed to looking confirm into what's around them. They don't want to stand out. We want to fit in. We want to
belong.
We want to belong. And belonging is a key thing. So there's this huge paradox, I guess, I'm trying to describe here. You want to belong, but then you can't be yourself in all situations. So then you're feeling not your true self, but you also want to belong. I think it's just really, it's a mess. It's a real mess. And so there's the majority-minority thing going on. It is very difficult to really...
Let's do some untangling then, because this is what our wonderful podcasts are all about. I think there's one important thing that we might not be mentioning here, which is like, okay, you've mentioned, like, okay, if you come from a different background, a certain like suited and booted, for instance, big boys club might not be what you're used to. But my question is, and maybe we'll put it in the podcast notes. There's a meme that I've seen on the wall once, where there's a boardroom, and one person is sitting dress as Batman. And the writing is as follows: dress not for the job you have, but for the one you want. What I mean by that is, who do you want to be? What is the the authenticity, or what is the thing you're seeking? Maybe, your background, your usual self is something that, you have, but you want to change, and you want to be a member of the big or old boys club, whatever, or something else, or want to be the trendy hipster in a loft. That's your choice. I would say that. What is the self you want to project? I'm not saying a mask, because it can change if you want to change it.
Yeah, okay, I see. I think that, but then you then get into other conversation or other challenges around identity crises and things like that. That can happen for people when they. I would use the word masking still. I think it would still apply here. You're then not being true to your origin story, your background, etc. Okay, that may be subjective, and okay. The point, I suppose, taking where you're going with that, TK, I think the challenge here, I suppose, is workplaces, leadership, or however you want to describe it, have a duty of care here, in my view, to really ensure that the environment they have allows for multiple expressions of, for example, professionalism. Let's just stick to that. Okay, so yes, professionalism culturally in your organization may be one thing, but think about, what does that exclude? What are you not allowing? And as a result of not allowing certain things, are you then potentially defeating your organization's ability to be successful, because you are now excluding members of society from fully being themselves and participating, engaging, being productive, like we said about that reinforcing loop. That's I think the crux of it for me.
Okay, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Especially, since we're publishing it in the Pride Month and such, and there's so much going on in various other things. And it's interesting. And I like what you said about the duty of care that you can express. I mean, it goes to so many things, right?
And I can share a story on that.
Go ahead. There's always a story.
Yeah, I mean, I worked many years ago at an organization. I joined there with the belief and with the understanding and the kind of, I suppose, approval of the hiring manager, and by extension, I thought other managers who he reported to come in and help with their ways of working, improve things, spot areas of concern, and encourage improvements and actually facilitate improvements. Yeah. Right. So that's what I was led to believe, and that's what I understood. And that felt true to my values. It felt like that's what I wanted to do. That was my purpose at that point in my career. I was passionate about that. I wanted to come in, make a difference. Great. Very soon after, realizing that I was unable to make the impact I was making because structurally in the organization at the time, things were going on that were inhibiting me from making change happen. So then I was in this really difficult, at the time, situation of, okay, I either speak up and say something about the incongruence I'm feeling, or I have to make a decision about whether this is the right place for me. And I think I was in this place where speaking up was important to me. I didn't want to be shut down. I didn't want to be told I couldn't say something. I wanted to feel like and free to say what I want to say. And I did that. I raised concerns with my manager's manager, because I had conversations with him. I started to build a relationship with him, and he was senior enough that these challenges were something he could do something about. And it seemed like they were being receptive. I even had meetings with HR at the time, because the lady in HR was part of solving this problem too. And again, she could be effective in making change happen. So, a month, 2 months, 3 months, time is moving on. I didn't see the change I wanted, but I felt I was being heard. So I felt, okay, I'm being true to my values in the sense of I'm speaking up, raising my issues, and it is me bringing my whole self. I'm bringing my values to the workplace. Fast forward 3 months, I get to the probationary point, and I'm told that, actually, sorry, but you are not someone who we want to keep in the organization because you don't fit our values as a business. And you are disruptive and your approach is not conducive to the organization. Fascinating. I mean, I was very upset about it at the time. I was in tears. I wasn't expecting it. It was totally out of the blue. I was confused, didn't understand it. It took me a while to get over that experience, but I would never go back and want to change who I was at that time. I think I did the right thing. I always believe and funnily enough, that company, I heard from someone, I think about 18, 24 months after that happened, they went under. So there you go. Maybe that says everything.
Poetic justice.
But yeah, I'm sharing that, I think, because I want to, I suppose, explain that, there is a dominant culture. There was a dominant culture that prioritized certain things. I was coming from a minority perspective in that sense of suggesting, hold on a minute, here's what I believe, here's what I think is true, here's me being myself. And in order to help you, this is what you need to be doing. And the power system pushed back and said, no, it's not happening.
But this is an interesting situation. It's obviously a personal story of yours, right? So you have the experience. But as I'm listening to it, knowing the story before too, the thing is that there was a situation where people were pretending that they were receptive to your actions until they weren't, right? And this is, I think, different. No one said, "Oh, Arif, when you do these things and you raise these important questions, I'm frowning on it, right? Or this might not fly over here." And you would know early, I guess, right? And you would have the choice to leave, change your behavior, use different ways.
Yeah.
But the problem with pretending was people weren't giving you any feedback.
So they weren't being authentic.
Receptive.
They weren't being authentic themselves. There you go. Yeah, fascinating. Right. I think we'll take a break there. We've talked a lot on this. And see you in a few moments. Thank you very much. Are you looking for even more content from Humble Associates? Well, we've just the treat for you, as we'll be running our next live LinkedIn webinar on Tuesday, July the 16th, titled The Key to Innovation, Unlocking Your Leader's Potential. Joining us will be Will La, the founder of Kakapo Labs, a multifunctional tech incubator known for its creative approach to problem solving. At Kakapo Labs, Will and his team explore the boundaries between various forms of media, producing thought-provoking, innovative products. Their work marries digital technology with traditional and non-traditional applications, partnering with diverse individuals from business owners to artists. Don't miss out on practical tips and inspiring stories from Will and all of us at Humble, as you'll learn how to lead with innovation and drive success in your organization. To find out more, head over to our website, humble.associates, to register and join the webinar. See you there. Welcome back, everyone. And before the break, I was sharing a bit of a personal story of my experience of authenticity in the workplace. And TK, as you were quite rightly pointing out, perhaps it was the other party who weren't being as authentic as we've been talking about. So really interesting. Where do we go next with the conversation? I mean, we've been talking about what authenticity means, how does it show up, and what does a workplace consider it to be authentic and not, and that kind of stuff, and some of the research around its meaning and how beneficial it can be. I wanted to go into a bit more detail around how it can affect leaders, but I don't know, TK, do you want to say anything else? Do you have any thoughts and opinions of what we were talking about earlier before we go into that?
Plus, I think that, the things, I think generally that things would be a bit easier if you were more authentic, especially in the situation that you've mentioned. So let's move on to leadership. So,
cool. Thanks, TK. So I think that interestingly, so some of the reading I was doing, an article by a professor. I always get the tricky names. Every episode, I'm really sorry. Herminia Ibarra. Okay, I'm giving that one a go. She's a professor of organizational behavior at London business school, so she knows her stuff. I'm sorry, Professor, if you're listening. I butchered your name again. I'm always butchering names. This is a running joke on this podcast.
The butcher of professors. Yes,
I'm going to introduce
myself. Title,
yeah, I'm going to introduce myself as the butcher of professional names or something in the next episode.
No, especially academics. If you walk into any academia, exactly. I'm sure you have to take some access.
Yeah. So anyway, what does she talk about? She has a problem with this rigid view of authenticity, which is, I think, quite interesting. So let's just break that down a bit. And some of the phrasing, and we've used it a little bit already. So, for example, this idea of being true to yourself, right? Or another one where I make value-based choices. Or, for example, maintaining, being fully congruent between how you feel and what you say or do. These are all elements or layers of how authenticity could show up, right?
Okay.
I'll go into each of those phrases, but before I do, a slight deviation, TK. As some of our listeners may know, and our clients do, of course, we're big on the leadership circle as a tool for leaders to assess their own behaviors and leadership style, right? One of the dimensions is authenticity, isn't it, TK?
Yes, even courageous authenticity, I would say.
I just for our listeners, do you mind sharing, I'm putting you on the spot here, so forgive me. Do you mind sharing a bit about what that means and why is that important in the context of the leadership circle?
I think, it's now we need to understand when it comes to leadership circle, nothing's black or white.
Of course
right?
not.
It's everything has its place. Some are possibly the things that we do are in a darker place that grow as roots to flourish to things that are the positive or shall I say, creative aspects of us. And courageous authenticity in this case is, I would characterize it very simply as not being afraid to say or do the things that align to your values despite the consequences.
So this is interesting. So thank you for that, TK. It's a good framing, and the challenges this professor has with some of this. So let's just provoke the conversation. So I gave one of those examples of authenticity. I said was making value-based choices. A bit kind of similar to what you've just said. So her issue is, okay, so we say leaders move into very senior roles. Okay, values that may have shaped them values that may have been shaped by their past experiences could, for example, become a challenge for them in a new role where there's more responsibility and there's more exposure. So, as an example, a value of being very considered and diligent and having tight control over operating details might produce authentic but wrong-headed behavior in the face of new challenges. So new challenges comes up, now you're unable to deal with it because you want to be very tightly controlled and, diligent and very careful and all the rest of it. So that's just one example.
Okay, what got you here won't get you there. Yeah, right. All right. But it doesn't mean that your fundamental beliefs or values will necessarily have to change.
Okay.
Now, the values have layers like donkeys and ogres and onions, right? And I think what's really important is there are some fundamental beliefs that we all hold that if we go against, it might be a challenge. So you might find yourself that, you were raised in a situation where having everything ordered, clearly planned, and so on is extremely important to you and fundamental to your existence. And you go to a leadership position when you have to firefight.
Right.
Now, the choice is you either adapt or, not succeed in this case, right? And you might be saying that, okay, now I have a conflict on the values, saying, I was taught to do this and the reality I'm presenting needs something else. Now, either I will change or I think this is not the position that would be best suited for me or I'm best suited for it.
And that requires, a very self-aware and very conscious leader to be smart enough to realize some of that and maybe speak up.
That's the number one thing we always teach leaders, right? Self-reflection, being able to understand that.
Great. And that's a really good point. So let's just take two other examples that she has defined or she's reflected on and given her thoughts. So I mentioned being true to yourself. Okay, that's a common one. We've heard that and probably we touched on it earlier in the podcast already. And I like the way she's challenged this because she's saying, okay, well, which self? We have many selves depending on the role we play and do in life, you know. And I can totally get that. Me being a parent, that's one version. Me being a co-founder, something else. Me with my mates when I'm riding my bike, another version of myself. We all have different versions. So which version am I bringing to the workplace? Good challenge, isn't it, TK?
Yeah, but you could also ask, which t-shirt and shoes are you wearing? I'm not saying these are your facets or, masks. These are parts of you. It's all you, isn't it?
It is.
You're all this.
Yeah. I guess her question at the end is, how can you be true to a future self that is still uncertain and uninformed? That's a very provocative one. I like that. Because you're still evolving, you're still changing, you're being transformed by everything around you all the time. So where you want to get to, where you want to be, okay, you don't know.
How can you be true to your future self?
Yeah, exactly.
You wouldn't know if you're true to your future self until the future comes that you will then recognize. Sorry, that's a tricky question, I guess. How you can't
getting really
can't
philosophical here.
Well, you've asked a philosophical question, so I give you a philosophical answer.
But I think what I'm appreciating is that she's provoking some thought here and not just you expect. Excuse me, not just being spoon fed. Okay, we hear the phrase "be true to." Okay, we just accept it. I think.
But wait. But there's more here, right? I definitely like the question. How can you be true to your future self?
Right.
I think this is a brilliant one, to be honest, because quite often, Arif, and me saying that, my usual saying, running a business is, when we get a great idea, we sometimes say, "Oh, geez, why have we waited for this so long? How stupid were we, right?"
Yeah,
and I always say, "Okay, Arif, no worries. A year from now, we'll be talking about the things we're doing now as being stupid. So don't worry, this will happen."
Yeah.
So this is me being true to the value of the unknown, right?
Okay.
You just don't know. I wish I were to know everything, but it's inherently unknowable.
Yeah.
So I have to be true to who I am right now and who I want to be.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I
But
can
again,
say.
you're demonstrating, but again, going, like you said, like we just said earlier, around self-awareness, etc. In this case, you're demonstrating genuine openness to learn, flexibility, that willingness to be adaptable to whatever the situation is. I can imagine that if you're a leader who, again, isn't familiar with that, then that rigidness may cause a problem. That I can imagine that as a flip side.
I'll provoke you, Arif. I think we all have our levels of rigidness. I think there are some things, and I'm sure you have them, and I know you have them, that you're probably quite rigid about.
Oh,
and
the
thing
thing
is,
resistance.
I might be self-reflecting, but I treat some things as fundamental.
No, I get it. There's always resistance. I guess I'm thinking about it's the experiences that have got us to where we are. And if that is if there's a reinforcement happening of that rigidity all throughout, and then now you're confronted with something where, oh, okay, I need to be adaptive to that. That's what I'm thinking about. That anyway.
Yes, and we now need to change our podcast label from the category of business to philosophy.
Okay, last piece of philosophy. All right. So
no. Do tell. Okay. I love it.
Okay, maintaining strict coherence between what you feel and what you say or do. Now, this is the third one. She's provoking again around. Okay, hold on a minute. If you do that in a situation where you're unproven, brand new role, first 30 days, you see these coaching programs, first 90 days as a leader, for example, right? It's very common. Or leaders receiving coaching when they are embarking on a very new senior role. Now, first impressions count. People consider that, especially at that level. They look into that. They assess you immediately. So now what happens if you there is this constant, okay, I'm going to say what I'm feeling and doing. Wouldn't that mean you're losing potentially your credibility and effectiveness? Because if you're constantly disclosing everything and you're an open book about how you're feeling all the time, people might be thinking, hold on a minute, this guy really knows. He might be talking about, oh, I'm really nervous, first day, I'm not really sure what's going to happen. I don't know what I'm going to be doing yet. I need to figure things out. Oh, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. He's taken on this CEO role, C-suite role. He's come in and or she's come in and they're now, talking in this way. I'm really unsure.
Does this guy or lady know what they're doing, by the way?
Sorry?
Do they know what they're doing?
Oh, no. I'm just...
or is it just self-doubt? No, because I'm serious about it, Arif. I'm serious. If you feel completely unsure and unprepared, are you at the right place? Especially when it comes to senior leadership and people. And I'm not criticizing it. I fully understand. But, if you are experienced, and I only hope that people in these senior positions have a certain experience, and definitely they do have the ability to reflect. They would know, and you would know, that at first you will feel like it might be inadequate. So your experience would tell you it's perfectly normal to feel this way. So I don't need to. I can say, okay, I'm new. I'm still observing, and many people do, right? It's okay. I don't. Yeah. Sorry.
But I think that there's a balance. That the point is, it can serve against you. That's what she's arguing.
Of course, it can serve against you. But wait. Okay, I get your point, Arif, and I get her point. Yes, people expect a big man. And I will say a big man leader, not a big woman leader, because of reasons that somehow it's just a big man leadership, that they know everything, that they are be all end all, and they cannot feel, thoughts of self-doubt and so on. And because we have this image in our head, when we see someone, a leader, saying that, they are being diminished. Yes, it happens. And it's not a problem of feeling this way. It's a problem that we have this model of leadership so ingrained. So this is what I think.
You're entitled to those thoughts, TK. Yeah, of course. I think all I'm coming at it from, as maybe not as passionately as you, is just it is thought provoking to consider that if you are asking someone who's going to be in a very senior position or is in a very senior position to be authentic, there is a flip side to this. Depending on some of these contexts and situations, I think that in itself is interesting to consider.
Well, there's always a flip side, Arif. This is a bit of a cop out. I will say this, right? If you are not able to say how you feel, and okay, fine, there's a limit to it, and you need to inspire confidence and so on. You will never be able to do that in this particular role.
So obviously in her research, she's talked to lots of leaders, right? And there's some nice stories of leaders who've been in this situation. I think
many have.
We shouldn't dismiss this entirely when these are real people with real stories on this. And one lady she interviewed as part of her research, she was in a new, very senior position, and she asked her new team for support, and she was openly acknowledging that she felt all over the place, and that she scrambled to learn unfamiliar aspects of the business, and she was working really hard to contribute to everything and solve all the problems. She was basically on the verge of burnout because of her overwork trying to get comfortable in her new role. Worse than that is because she was being vulnerable with her team all the time. It really damaged her standing with the team because they created a perception of her. And then years later, as part of the research this professor did, speaking to her, interviewing her, her words were, the quote is, she said to the professor, look, being authentic, quote, this is in quotes, being authentic doesn't mean that you can be held up to the light and people can see right through you. But at that time, that was how she saw it, you see. And instead of building trust, she made people question her ability to do the job. But that's interesting. She says it doesn't mean that you can be held up to the light and people see right through you. There you go, TK. I think that in itself, I think, is informative around what level of authenticity do you show in the work that you're doing, especially as someone at that level.
As we're talking, you can probably see the level of authenticity I aspire to demonstrate. We can see
that
so
very clearly.
I guess you have that, but it's also, it's important to reflect that it's not everyone's cup of tea in terms of being a leader, and it's also not everyone's cup of tea in terms of working with such a leader, right? So, there's TK for you.
Brilliant. I think we've had a fascinating, provoking conversation today. We've gone through quite a bit of a journey on the podcast today. TK, I don't know if you have any summary thoughts and feelings that you want to share around everything, whether it's the first half when we were talking about it in general terms, but also this latter discussion on leaders showing up and authenticity and how it can be a challenge for them I'll give you an opportunity to share some summary thoughts.
You can only to summarize. Well, I will simply say that, again, it's important, for you to understand how authentic you are, how authentic you want to be, and what can you bring to your situation with more authenticity, and what will happen if there's less authenticity, being negative or positive, right? Yeah. So just be conscious about it, really, and make a conscious decision. I guess I can always say that, right? Living in a conscious and this way that you're making the decision of what you want to do.
I love that. I think that's a very valuable.
I want to be authentic, by the way, and Batman.
Thanks, TK. That's a very valuable contribution. I think it's a very valuable suggestion to our listeners out there. So thank you for that. And that's all we've got time for today. So thank you again to all our listeners for joining us, for engaging in the episode. We hope you've enjoyed listening to our thoughts on this topic. And if you have, please, if you haven't already, like or subscribe to our podcast, and please also leave us a review, because that always helps us on the podcast platforms.
And I'll let you guess how many stars you probably should put in. Be authentic.
Be authentic, please do. With that, thank you very much, and we'll see you on our next episode. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.